right. We're faced with an unusual circumstance of actually being ahead of schedule, and not to be the one to lose that track record, we're going to start a few minutes early. We do have some speakers that are in transit, but hopefully we'll get through some administrative stuff, and they'll arrive optimally on time. So welcome to the March Academic and Student Life Committee meeting. We have a very robust agenda. As I said, I've been tracking topics that various board members have raised over the course of the year, and I have them on a long list here on my phone, and today we're going to take up two of those, or three of those, specifically. We're going to deal with an update on what's happening with our fraternity and sorority system. There will be a conversation about PACE. I think, Mr. Webb, you had asked about getting an update on that. And we're also going to have a panel of faculty members to talk about the climate on grounds here. In addition to that, the provost has some administrative matters, including the establishment of 6 new endowed professorships, the discontinuation of 2 master's degree programs, and the review of enrollment projections through the academic year. We've also punted a couple of topics that normally would come up in academic and student life, such as updates on kind of our admissions process. That'll be discussed tomorrow in the broader board meeting, and we'll also take up some topics of relevance that some of you have raised regarding D&I in the audit committee tomorrow. So with that, Mr. Provost, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. As Mr. Brown mentioned, we have 9 action items for the board's consideration. As is standard, the background information is in materials. I'll go through the professorships first, then the degree programs, then our enrollment projections. So beginning with the professorships, the first 2 professorships are in the School of Medicine, the Pelican Professorship in Neuroscience, and the Women's Midlife Health Professorship. The Pelican Professorship, funded by the Pelican Fund, will leverage the university's strength in interdisciplinary neuroscience research, which we heard about earlier this morning, and has particular focus on Huntington's disease research. The Women's Midlife Health Professorship will be used to recruit and retain exceptional faculty to lead the Midlife Health Center that Dr. Joanne Pinkerton founded and brought to national prominence. The Lewis F. Ryan Professorship in Law is named for the donor, a 1973 law graduate who worked for many years as an attorney with Landmark Communications under the leadership of Frank Batten Sr. The Donald Black Professorship in Holocaust Studies is named for a late member of the university's faculty who taught in the sociology department and the School of Law, and will be a crucial addition to our scholarship and teaching in Jewish studies. The last 2 professorships on the agenda are both university professorships. These are the $5 million professorships, matchable at that level, created through the Jefferson Scholars Foundation. As I mentioned, both qualify for matching funds. The first is the Paul Tudor Jones Jefferson Scholars Foundation Distinguished University Professorship in Climate and the Environment. And the second is the Melville Foundation Jefferson Scholars Foundation Distinguished University Professorship 2. The first of the Melville professorships was established by the board in March of 2022. We are enormously grateful to all of the donors who've supported these professorships. We moved through them quickly, but we know that the decisions and the life commitment that led to these are considerable. Mr. Chair, I recommend these 6 resolutions for the establishment of these professorships for the board's approval.
Is there a motion? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We're grateful to the donors for their support of these professorships and the ways their generosity strengthens the university. Mr. Provost, will you please present the next 2 action items?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The next 2 action items relate to the discontinuation of 2 master's degree programs in the College and Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. The first is the Master of Arts in Asian Studies, and the second is the Master of Arts in Chemistry. Both are being discontinued due to lack of sustaining enrollments and have been through the regular process of review within the university, concluding with the Faculty Senate before coming to the Board of Visitors. I thought I would just note on the second, the Master of Arts in Chemistry, it is not that there's a lack of interest in graduate studies in chemistry, it's the Master of Arts degree as opposed to the Master of Science degree. And as the department took a look at the 2 degrees they were offering both, they really understood that it was the Master of Science degree, which was the more pertinent degree both for people's professional experience, those who want to do a PhD. So rather than having 2 parallel programs, they'll focus on the one. Mr. Chair, I recommend the board's approval of these resolutions.
That's a question. Ian, what is the criteria for evaluating and then ultimately discontinuing a program? Just real quick, nothing.
So it's a combination of both an internal process and working with Chev. And so this is a great partnership with Chev, and particularly for the Masters of Arts and Asian Studies program. So Chev monitors to try to get a sense of what their sense of sustainability is. Is there enough demand? How many students are applying? How selective are they? Also then try to get a sense of what the professional opportunities are on the backhand side. I'm a humanities professor. I believe in the humanities. I believe in the humanities graduate education deeply. And it has also been the fact that in a number of areas in humanities graduate education, there are fewer professorship positions than there have been in the somewhat more recent past. So this is part of a national trend of sort of consolidating in the humanities programs. The deans of the school to go through the same exercise and just try to determine, and the ratio of the number of faculty per student, is it the right investment in funds? And I do want to commend Dean Akampora. We heard today about the incredible success that the college and graduate school have received in supporting graduate education. She really believes in it. And she's also willing to do difficult things to make sure that the money's going to the right places.
Thank you.
Right. You've heard the provost recommend the discontinuation of the two programs. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Provost, will you please proceed with the last action?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The final item that I present for the board's review are our enrollment projections for fall 2025 through fall 2031. We present enrollment projections, and again, these are projections. These aren't absolute numbers, but this is what we're projecting based on what we're seeing, based on our programmatic development. We present program enrollment projections to the board every 2 years, and we do that both as a matter of board governance and as part of our partnership with Chev. So Chev uses those, they ask for them from every university in the Commonwealth to try to manage overall kind of enrollment planning for the Commonwealth. So we give you a 7-year projection, but we revise it every 2 years. We come back to you for 2 years. Kind of key takeaways on this is we're not projecting any significant growth in undergraduate on-grounds enrollment. If you've looked at the data we're keeping at this point for our projections, we might return to you in subsequent years with other projections, but we're keeping the size of the first-year class essentially steady. There are a lot of factors that go into consideration. We need to make sure that we can house our students, that there are dining supports for them, their student affairs support, library support, and so that seemed to us the right and prudent thing to do on that front. There is a marginal increase, I believe it's 50 starting 2 or 3 years from now, and then growing a little bit beyond that in transfer students in the out years. But again, we're basically looking at essentially flat, marginal growth on that side. There are 2 areas where we're projecting growth. The first is for graduate students on grounds. And again, while you just approved a discontinuation of a program, increasing and strengthening our graduate enterprise is kind of a key part of what we do. The majority of the graduate increase, which we're projecting to be about a 9% increase over that period of time, are distributed between arts and sciences, the Batten School, which is planning to launch a series of new graduate master's programs, the School of Data Science, which is growing incredibly rapidly, medicine, where we do see growth in the School of Medicine, particularly in the biomedical sciences, and in nursing. And one of our commitments, both to the university and to the Commonwealth, is to be doing everything we can to address the nursing shortage. So we're projecting about a 9% increase in those 2 areas over this period of time. The largest projected growth is in our off-grounds programs, and that's a projection of about a 28% growth over that period of time, much of this at UVA Nova. The president was at a fantastic event a week ago, Jim, I think for the opening of our Fairfax campus at UVA Nova this past Friday, and we are looking forward to building new programs for working professionals, master's programs, certificate programs, and then also some additional online growth, almost all at the graduate level, again, data science, School of Education. So that's where we're seeing the growth projections. So happy to take any questions, but let me formally conclude this. Mr. Chair, I recommend the board authorize the provost's office to continue to implement plans with Chev as outlined in the materials provided.
And those projections are on page 20 of the academic and student life portion of the board book. Just a couple questions.
Yep.
Is this just a statistical projection? And what are the inputs? Are you looking at birth rates, high school graduation rates? What are the things that drive these assumptions?
By these assumptions. So for our first year, so let me just start with the undergraduates to begin with. If we were purely looking at demand, we could grow. I mean, there's just no question that we could grow if we're purely looking at demand. We just see year-over-year increases in the number of enrollments. So from our perspective, and just as a consequence of being a great university and having great faculty, we are not facing the demographic cliff that some of our peer institutions are.
Can you speak to that? So that's kind of what I was getting at, because
Yeah.
there's a broader concern about higher education that enrollment is declining, and it's impacting, if you think about the Commonwealth system as a whole, schools that are not as competitive are suffering, and there's somewhat of an interest as a partner in the Commonwealth system to not draw away students. So Ian, Jim, you guys can maybe better
Say
articulate
something
that.
then, Jim, since you work with the council presidents, the other presidents. Yeah, we want to be good partners to our peer institutions, other institutions in the Commonwealth. We're invested in the health and well-being of higher education Commonwealth-wide. And so don't want to be, just for its own sake, competing, with, just not name institutions, but, other institutions in the Commonwealth. We want them to be healthy and thriving also. I can say a couple more things about considerations, but Jim, I don't know if you want to.
No, I agree with you. There's concern about enrollment at a number of schools across the Commonwealth. And, it's not a one-on-one trade-off for every student we accept. That's one student who's not going to go to another of our sister schools, but there's an impact for sure. But I think there are independent reasons not to be growing at the undergraduate level as well. I mean, I think that we're a very good size and have hit the sweet spot of being big enough so that you can explore or pursue any interest you want, but small enough that it still feels fairly intimate. And I think that's a key part of UVA's identity.
Yeah.
And just completely agree. And so it's that with the other institutions, it's the feel and the nature of who we are. And one of the things that attracts students to the university, and I think one of the things that attracts staff and faculty, is that while we are the flagship public, in comparison with many of our most competitive national peers, we're a small public. We're still an intimate place. And then there's science to it as well. If you had increased, enrollments, housing, dining, library, IT support, student affairs support, faculty, so you drive costs up, and so this just seemed like the wisest course of action for us at this point. Jada, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Any other questions on this? So the purpose is asked for a motion. Is there a motion? Second from the director. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a series of presentations. The first of them, I'm going to invite Bree Gertner to the table. Many of you know Bree. You're about to get to know her better still. I'll say a word about that in a moment. But Bree is the Deputy Provost and Senior Vice Provost for Academic Affairs. A wonderful colleague, a great friend, former chair of the philosophy department, former associate dean of arts and humanities, former interim dean of the College and Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, former member of the faculty senate, distinguished philosopher, and she's going to be presenting today on the results of the most recent SERU data. SERU is the student experience at the research university. The last time we shared SERU data with the board was when we were presenting the findings of the Religious Diversity and Belonging Task Force. And one of the commitments that we made was to return to the board with more recent data. I think you'll recall the data that we could share at that point was from 2022. So we do the SERU data, which is not exclusive to questions of belonging and religion. It's really an overall take. What is the undergraduate experience like, self-reported by students? The most recent time in which we conducted the survey was in the spring of 2024. So this is quite timely from a very difficult time. And Bree will give us the exact dates, but I believe it was April and May of this past year. And I think that's important to remember as Bree presents the data to you. So this was really in the height, of what was really hard this past spring. But Bree is going to, this is Bree's second last day as Deputy Provost. It is my, the intention is pending board approval tomorrow that Bree will become interim provost beginning on Saturday, but still in her deputy provost role. We've asked Bree to give us just a kind of a broad overview of some big takeaways, and then to be able to talk about what we're seeing in the religious diversity and belonging results from the task force. So, Bree, over to you.
Thank you, thank you. And could we show the first slide, please?
That's the clicker.
Actually, the second slide. Thank you. So as Ian said, CIRO is the student experience in the research university. It's a consortium of 28 public universities in North America. It is American universities plus the University of Toronto. And the survey, we administer the survey every 2 years. I will say that I have Sarah Schultz-Robinson sitting next to me. She is Associate Director of Institutional Research and Analytics, and she is an expert on survey research, so she will keep me honest in presenting the data. We run the survey every 2 years, and it's very helpful because we can look at trends over time. We also are able to pick out peers, and again, this is only public universities that participate, so all of the peers that we use for these purposes are public universities. For my discussion today, we're using 4 peers: the University of California, Berkeley, the University of Michigan, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and the University of Texas at Austin. And before we get into the data, which is in your book and which I'll display, I wanted to just talk a little bit about broad takeaways from the survey. The survey is very large. It asks about many aspects of student experience, including academic aspects, the feeling of safety and security on campus, social aspects. Many of the questions are questions where we hope that we score well, but some of them are actually not about doing well or not well. They just reveal things about the student experience that are interesting. So some broad takeaways when we're looking both at how we fare this year in comparison to previous years and looking at trends, and also looking at how we fare relative to our peers. The news is almost uniformly positive. So we have improved, and there's a trend of improvement. I asked Sarah to pull data from beginning 2018, so that's 4 surveys, 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2024. So over the course of those 4 surveys, we are at the highest level from all of those on several very general characteristics, like being satisfied with the value of your education. So students are asked how satisfied they are with the value of their education for the price that they're paying, whether they perceive the university as welcoming, whether they feel safe from crime and violence on campus. The next one I think is especially telling. They're asked, knowing what I know now, I would still choose to enroll at UVA. They're asked the extent to which they agree with that statement. And for all of those, we are at the highest level since 2018, which is as far back as we looked. And for all of those, we are slightly higher than our peers. And as you'll see, these are genuine peers. These are our top-ranked public universities. Another data point that I found interesting, the vast majority of our students, 85 to 90% of our students, say that in the past year they have often interacted with people with views different from their own and have understood the world from someone else's perspective, both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. Before I turn to the data on the slides, there's one more data point that I'm just going to mention because I found it so interesting. And you might think about it, when you think about a college student today, how likely is it that their plans include earning degrees beyond the bachelor's degree? So for our students, UVA students in 2024, only 16% said that they did not plan to earn any degree beyond the bachelor's degree. So 16% said, I'm going to stop with the bachelor's degree. Another 12% said, I don't know. That's fair enough. This includes first-year students. But 72% of our students have positive plans to earn a degree beyond the bachelor's degree. And again, that is slightly higher than our peers. Okay, so now I'm going to turn to the slides and the data points. Could I? Great. So the first slide is very general. Students are asked, how satisfied are you with your overall academic experience and your overall social experience? The orange line is UVA. The blue line is that peer group of 4 schools. As you can see, the trend lines are up and we do better than our peers. So when we look at this, one question we ask is, how many students gave a positive response? So the question offers 6 responses from very dissatisfied, dissatisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, those are the negative, to somewhat satisfied, satisfied, very satisfied. 95% of UVA respondents gave a positive response to the question about overall academic experience, and 90% gave a positive response to the question about overall social experience. The next slide is about the feeling of belonging.
So
Yes, go ahead.
I don't understand the y-axis.
The y-axis. Okay, can we go back to the previous one?
Is that the mean, the median, the mode? Okay.
It's the mean. So it's a 6-point scale. 1 is very dissatisfied, 6 is very satisfied. Oh yeah.
So basically in 2024, it was a 4.97.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
It's impressive. Wow.
Okay, I think we can go to the next slide now. So this is about the feeling of belonging and the feeling of being valued. And as we've talked about before in this room, the feeling of belonging to the institution is highly correlated with academic success. Those are not separate, and so students who feel that they belong here, who feel that they're really part of this place, are going to feel better in the classroom, they're going to feel better in the library, they're going to feel better in the lab, and they're going to perform better. So the question was, how much do you agree with the following statement? I feel that I belong at UVA. And again, our trend line is going up. We are above our peers. 85% of UVA respondents gave a positive response to this. We would love for that number to be higher, of course, but the trend line is promising. Similarly, with the prompt, how much do you agree with the statement? I feel valued as an individual at UVA. 87% of UVA respondents gave a positive response, and we are slightly ahead of our peers.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but do you know the breakdown between first year, second year, third year, fourth year? Like how many?
So we could pull that information. I will tell you that respondents to the survey overall were roughly proportional to the class years. So actually, let me pause on that for a second, but we could disaggregate the feeling of belonging by year. You don't know that off the top of your head.
I do.
Oh, you do.
It's a U shape, right? It starts very high. Then you go into the second and the third year and it starts to dip a little bit, and then you get into the fourth year and it comes back up.
Which actually tracks most employment satisfaction surveys. Early career starters tend to be high, and then when they get mid-career, they feel as if they're stalling or stagnating. They are in the bottom of the U, and then towards the end of their career, or when they're more seasoned or senior, they tend to have a higher performance. That's been our trend at Dominion, and then also when you look at other, they compare you with other companies, so you get to see that data universally across the industries. So, yeah.
I'm going to take the survey at 5 o'clock tomorrow.
You'll be very happy, right?
Did I miss hearing the number of students that were interviewed and what the p-value was? Was it statistically significant group for response?
So I will start and then I will turn it over. So our response rate for the survey was 18%. That response rate is a bit higher than our peers, but Sarah has taught me that response rates overall to surveys have gone down since COVID, so it's actually lower than it used to be. The UVA students who responded were proportional in terms of what year they were in school, their school of enrollment, again, roughly proportional to the population. We looked at a number of different factors. The one factor where they were not proportional to the population was that women were overrepresented and men were underrepresented on the survey. And again, Sarah tells me that that is the norm for surveys generally.
Right. Yeah. So in 2018, our response rate was around 24%, and it's kind of slowly gone down since that time. In 2024, it was 18%. When you look at the data as a whole, the margin of error for that is still very low. That's still a really good response rate for a survey, and it's similar to our peers. When you start breaking the data down into certain smaller groups, then you tend to want to have higher response rates for some of the smaller breakdowns. But for overall, I think your question was around margin of error. It's still less than 5%, less than 3%.
Thank you.
I have a question about the peers. How are they chosen? And why did we choose these 4 peers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we started with a set of 11 schools, and those were the schools that that administered the survey at the same time that we did, because different schools are on different schedules. So we started with that group of 11, and then we simply asked ourselves, which of these do we consider our peers for purposes like this? So, for example, the University of Oklahoma was on the list. We don't ordinarily consider that a peer, and maybe you have more information about how we choose peers in different contexts.
Right, so we also have IPEDS peers, which these 4 peers would be part of. So there's a couple of different.
Could you say what IPEDS is?
Sure. IPEDS is the integrated post-education,
Post-secondary education.
post-secondary educational. It's the federal government's reporting requirements for universities. So when we're reporting federally, we have peer groups. Our IPEDS peer group is larger than these 4, but they match the way that we also provide comparisons more broadly in a lot of other areas of our institutional reporting.
Is this the same peer group we've used in past years?
We almost always are comparing ourselves, yes, to UC Berkeley, University of Michigan, University of Texas, the University of North Carolina. If we expand that, I think sometimes we've also looked at UCLA, which is in there. There's some other UC system schools that we could also pull in, but those 4 that we are comparing in this presentation are pretty standard.
Mr. Harris, again, one of the specificities of this is if you want a cohort comparison, same time, same situation to sort of in time, for this one, you have to start with who are the other schools who happen to have taken it at the same period of time. So you've got kind of like a smaller group overall that is doing it at the same time, and then try to then from within that figure out who do we commonly compare ourselves to. So where is there kind of an overlap between this smaller subset? So it's not like the whole AAU group takes it at the same time.
So the gap between our scores and our peer group scores, is that delta remain the same over the years, or, are peer groups gaining on it, so to speak?
With respect to the questions that are being reported here, you can sort of start to see that in some questions, there's times where the peer group is a little bit closer. It depends on the question, but in a lot of questions, we keep this small, what I would say, we slightly outperform. It's a slight outperformance of our peers.
Yeah, so just to remember, this represents the course of 6 years. So you can kind of see the trend line that there's, pretty close to parallel, not perfectly parallel over those times. Okay, could I have the next slide? So one reason that we're talking about this data is as a follow-up to our report about the Religious Diversity and Belonging Task Force from last year. And at that time, we presented data, including data about the experiences of Jewish students and Muslim students at UVA. So this is the promised update. This prompt is, I feel that I belong at UVA. And as you will see, the left side is Jewish students, the right side is Muslim students. Among Jewish students at UVA who responded, 92% gave a positive response. And so Jewish students report a higher sense of belonging than UVA respondents generally at 90%. Among Muslim students, that number is 77%. So fewer Muslim students, or I should say Muslim students are less likely overall to report a sense of belonging at UVA than other UVA students. The sense of belonging among Muslim students is actually a place where we do not do quite as well as our peers. So for us, it's 77% a positive response. For our peers, it's 81%. Could I have the next slide? Back one. Back. Thank you. The data about feeling valued is broadly similar. The prompt is, I feel valued as an individual at UVA. Again, all UVA respondents respond 90% respond positively among all UVA respondents. Among Jewish students, that's 92%. For our peers, 82% of Jewish students respond positively. Among Muslim students, 75% respond positively. That's very close to our peers at 74%. And again, I would just note that the sense of belonging at UVA and the sense of feeling valued as an individual at UVA are similar. So Jewish students feel similarly belonging and valued. Muslim students feel similarly belonging and valued. Not to each other, but to those two metrics. So up to this point, we've had mostly good information, although the sense of belonging and the sense of feeling valued by our Muslim students is concerning. The next slide is going to look very different. The prompt here, and it's important to pay attention to the prompt here is, to what extent do you agree with the following statement? Students of my religious beliefs are respected on this campus. As you can see on the left, for Jewish students, there was a dramatic plunge from 2022 to 2024. For Muslim students, there was also a dramatic decrease from 2022 to 2024. For both of these, the decrease was similar to our peers. For Muslim students, it was a bit less, the decrease was a bit less than our peers. Overall, among Jewish students who responded to the survey, 52% responded positively to the prompt. For our peers, that number was 45%. Among Muslim students, 66% responded positively. Among our peers, that number was 55%. So what we're seeing here is something that we noticed in a less dramatic form when we looked at the data from 2022 in the context of the task force report. And that is, there is a divergence between the sense of belonging and the agreement with the statement, student of my religious beliefs are respected on this campus. So Putting it another way, Jewish students at UVA feel that they belong here. Jewish students at UVA feel that they are valued as an individual on this campus. Students at UVA, only about half of them agree that students of my religious beliefs are respected on this campus. With Muslim students, there's also a divergence, but the divergence is not as extreme. So in thinking about, yeah.
What's the answer for Christian students?
Yeah. And other religions too. Were other religions other than Muslim and Jewish students asked these questions?
Yes, so the overall number, this is on the bottom, for all UVA respondents is 89%. Christian students represent the largest religious group at UVA, and so I think Christian students, if I remember it, is it 89%?
It's right around there.
It's right around 89%. So again, 89% of UVA students agree that students of my religious beliefs are respected on this campus. So when we look at this divergence, it really raises the question, how is it that, for example, Jewish students at UVA overwhelmingly feel valued as an individual, overwhelmingly feel that they belong on this campus, but do not, in anything like those numbers, agree that students of their religious beliefs are respected on this campus. This phenomenon, and here I am just offering a possible interpretation, may reflect the difference in the kinds of prompts. So notice that the prompts about belonging and feeling valued use the word I. So I belong at UVA, I feel valued at UVA. That invites the student to reflect on their personal experience, how they experience UVA. This prompt, students of my religious beliefs are respected on this campus, that's not about their own personal experience, that's asking them to make a judgment about the climate in general, a more general judgment. And so it may be analogous to a phenomenon that we saw last year before the national elections, when voters were interviewed about whether they trusted the US elections in general, and voters said, I think it was 58% said that they trusted US elections. And then when they were asked, do you trust your local election office? So when you go to vote in the national elections, do you think that your vote will be counted fairly? 76% thought that it would be. And so reflecting on their own experience of their own polling place versus being asked to think in general terms about a general condition beyond them produced a disparity. So that's just one possible interpretation. Sarah, do you have thoughts about this?
So the consortium of Sarah universities that conduct the survey have had similar conversations, and it is exactly as you've described it. It's this difference between how do I feel versus I'm being asked to think about this group that I belong in, and you're less likely to be as definitive in your response when you're trying to take into consideration of all of the group members around you. So one thing that we can do, because we conduct this survey every 2 years, we could add questions in 2026 and ask students, how do you feel as an individual? Do you feel as an individual that you're respected with your religious beliefs?
So there is this enormous science behind surveying, and I'm assuming that Sarah involved people who do this for a living, and I'm not an expert in the epidemiological approach to surveying, which has very specific math and very specific statistical methods that go into the formulation of the questions, the way they're presented. For example, you don't give people an odd number of choices in surveys, because then you will have a disproportionate number of people who choose the middle. So it's one of the theories of surveying that you only provide an even number of options. So when it's a 6-point, not a 7-point scale. The difference between the previous slide is the active voice, and this is passive voice. And that also factors into things. And so this may be as simple as the mathematical difference between active and passive voice.
Okay, thank you.
I had a thought too. I don't ask this question to dispel the findings. They're obviously relevant and important. But if 18% of our 20,000 approximately undergraduates filled this out, so that's 3,500 total responses, something like that, right? And so that's not very many. And then within 3,500, what percentage of our students are Muslim and Jewish?
Yeah,
Like we're
so-
talking about not very many people.
Right, so the raw numbers on here, I just happen to know this.
Okay.
You'll correct me, I believe it's 99 Jewish students and 90 Muslim students, is that right?
That's right.
So that does raise the question of statistical significance. However, I think that when we see the trend lines and especially here, when we look at all of our peers and we think about the number of Jewish students and Muslim students at those four universities cumulatively, and some of those universities are very large, the raw numbers for our peers will be higher. And so I think those two things together, looking at the trends over time and then comparison with the peers and the fact that, again, what happened between 2022 and 2024 seems to me to reflect a national conversation that's happening. It's no accident that those lines go down for UVA and for all of these other four schools. And I think they do go down for all of these.
Yeah, I just had a brief question. So I think for the feeling valued question, belonging question, and then the respect for religion question, in 2018, the percentages seem to be pretty aligned. So in 2018, I think it was around 80% of Jewish students and around 70% of Muslim students said that they felt valued as individuals. And that aligned with the percentages for the respect for religion question. And so my question for you is, if they aligned then and then they don't align now, is there another explanation, maybe with respect to, like, is there a difference between feeling valued versus feeling respected? Is one related to UVA as an institution and another is related to the student body more directly? Are there other explanations that you could think of that are specific to this question?
Are you comparing these two, belonging and feeling valued, or are you comparing it with the slide here?
Yeah, so for feeling valued, for example, it says, like, in 2018, 85% of Jewish students felt valued. But then the next slide, if you go to respect for religion, it was a little bit less. It was like 75%
Yeah.
of Jewish students, but it wasn't as divergent as you see now.
Yeah.
So my question is, if it was about the same for those two questions in 2018, but it's pretty significantly different in 2024, are there other sort of explanations with respect to differences between feeling respected and feeling valued that you all have thought about?
So what I'm seeing is that both of those improved from 2018, right? And then after 2022, obviously, one of them went way down and the other one continued to improve on both. So the divergence that we're seeing has been there all along, right? So it's now gotten much more dramatic, but even back in 2018, the agreement was higher than the sense that students of my religious beliefs, that is the feeling of belonging, was higher than students of my
One of my
religious beliefs.
takeaways, I mean, at a certain level is, we don't know. We're driving it, there's some plausible explanations. We don't know if those are the explanations or not. So to what extent is it or is it not related to how the survey question is asked? Is reason one. To what extent is it that difference between how I feel, but I'm part of, I identify in these questions with a religious community. I mean, we identify in many ways. And it's possible to have, in I think many of our experiences in life, I'm having this experience, but maybe my community is having a slightly different one. So is that the primary driver of it? I just think this is something that we really do. We because we're now seeing this divergence between belonging and respect continued and dropping off. We have to understand this more. We're just getting this data now. But I think that's a huge question both for UVA, for our peers, and I'll say for the institution I'm about to go to, because it seems to be a national issue. for us to come to some understanding of. And so that's a big takeaway for me is let's try to understand it more fully and probably maybe work not only with your office, but see if we actually have faculty research expertise in the quantitative and other social sciences who can help us really get to the bottom of this. Then the second is, what are we doing? Because we can't wait, just to understand. We need to be able to go ahead and act. And I do know, Bree, that in addition to questions about this, you wanted to share a little bit of what it is that we're trying to do as we think about these issues.
Well, with all due respect, I don't think we want to act until we have the scientific answers and the details of the study. For instance, was there any selection bias in this survey? And I ask that because it seems to me if students were really that concerned about it, we would have had greater than an 18% response rate, regardless of what COVID has done to national responses. And you actually went from 24 to 18%. So is it that much of an issue? And how did you eliminate any selection bias in the study?
So I will say, this is a large study that asks lots of questions, and the first set of questions that the students answer have to do with what is your religious affiliation, all of that, and it's those answers to those questions that enable us to disaggregate the data in the ways that we do. But in the end, it means the student spending a lot of time sitting and taking a survey.
Right, so the series survey isn't a climate survey, it's not it's a student experience survey. A good portion of the survey focuses on their experience and their major. It asks a lot of questions about how involved they are in extracurricular activities, whether they've pursued leadership roles. It asks questions of finances. So it's a pretty broad survey. So when it's advertised to students, it's not advertised as though they're going to receive these kinds of questions the way if you were receiving a climate survey, you would sort of expect that. We continue to work on response rates, but certainly they could be improved. The comparisons are helpful because our peers are under the same constraints around response rates. Our peers are the peers that we're comparing our data to, they're also at those response rates as well. So they have the same, we can assume that they're under the same selection bias constraints. But selection bias is absolutely an issue with surveys, for sure.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, again, I think I would not be prepared to make any decisions about where we're going to go with this, what we're doing, any expenses that we might incur until we have a lot more details to this study.
Well, I don't believe that we're requiring any action on this. We committed that we would come back and provide this information once the data was in. We're doing that. There are some actions that are taken if we advance to the...
One more slide, yes.
One more slide. There are actions that have been taken in light of that. But of course, this is the opportunity for discussion, and if there are interest or perspectives that board members want to offer, this is an opportunity to do that. But want to advance the slide? Yeah. Well, let's advance the slide so we can make sure everybody's level set on where we are.
My final slide, then next.
Yeah. Who has the clicker?
I had it. I think perfection is the enemy of the good. That slide is pretty telling that there's a problem. I don't think we have to understand it 100% to try to do the best we can to solve the problem. And if you can't wait two years to act on it, so I think it's a really compelling study, and I would argue, Steve, that we should be very proactive in taking the information we have, granted imperfect, to enhance the experience for our Jewish students, our Muslim students, all our students, and not wait.
Point well made.
So Marie, why don't you just
Sure.
hit the high points here?
Sure. So these are a few of the actions that we've taken. And these actions were in response to the Religious Diversity and Belonging Task Force report, not to this most recent data. We launched these before this data came out. We've hired a dedicated civil rights response coordinator in the Equal Opportunity and Civil Rights Office. And that's someone who is specially trained to respond to reports of bias, discrimination, harassment, other kinds of issues. We're hiring a program coordinator for interfaith engagement in student affairs. That's an office that facilitates engagement between students of different religious faiths. We're participating in something called the Campus Climate Initiative, and this is a program that's offered by Hillel, National Hillel. We are in a cohort of, I believe, 15 or so schools this year. This is the third or fourth year of the program, so many, many universities have gone through the program. It's an intensive program. It is a 10-month program involving some of our senior leadership in a series of workshops and trainings that aim to train our senior leaders to then work with their teams to ensure that we have a climate where Jewish students feel comfortable expressing their Jewish identity. So not only a sense of belonging here as an individual, but a sense of belonging here at UVA as a Jewish student. We've engaged a small group called Muslim Campus Life that's made up of academics, scholars, that work on these issues to provide a training workshop, again, for a group of staff. This happened last month. It was a half-day workshop. It was very well attended. Student affairs staff, advising staff, staff from safety and security attended the workshop to learn about how to recognize and combat Islamophobia. And we are developing student orientation programming around harassment and discrimination related to religious beliefs. So I think all of these are steps that we are taking, can take, and should take at this moment because we understand that we want students of every faith to feel that UVA is their university, that they are a part of this university, and that they can bring their whole selves to the classroom and the sports field, and I shouldn't say this, to the corner on Saturday night.
So, conversation.
I look at all this data and think it's a very firm grasp of the obvious. I hope we didn't pay a lot of money for this survey, because it told us something that all you have to do is walk around here to know the data. And I look at this page and I see a lot of words and a lot of administrative overhead, but I don't see anything that's going to do anything. Dan, do you see anything here that's going to affect this issue?
I'm not intimately familiar with Hillel's international program, Bert. I know they're very confident in its success. So I can't speak to the other program. I can only speak to that one. But they've had success and they believe in it. And I'm very supportive that UVA has agreed to participate. So I'm actually beyond, I'm thankful to that the administration has agreed to do this, because there's a political overtone that people who have a negative feeling toward it. So I'm glad that there was enough, I don't know if courage is maybe too strong a word, but willingness to participate.
But look, go ahead.
I was just curious, have you seen an uptick in, or, the number of reports of discrimination against Muslims or Jewish? Have you got a new person at ESCR? Has that person been busy?
So I don't believe that there's been an uptick, but I can check in on that.
I'm curious the frequency of those sort of complaints. I have no idea.
So that responsibility reports to which organization? The monitoring of those complaints and other issues?
ESCR.
USCR reports up through Kevin McDonald's office.
Yeah.
And let me give you, I think we need to come back to you with the data on this. My broad sense is, and this is something that we shared last year, is that over the course of the past academic year, there was an increase. And my broad sense is that in this academic year, we have not seen that, and the numbers have gone down. But again, this is my broad sense. I have not reviewed the data. recently, so let us come back
Yeah,
to you
I
with this.
believe that's
That's,
right.
that's my broad sense, is that there was a slope up,
I-
and that in the past sort of 6 to 8 months, that there's been a slope down. But again, I could be wrong. I haven't recently reviewed the data, but that's.
I hate to be a stickler for data and science, but if you go back 4 slides, the fact is, so go back, one more. So 85% of UVA students believe that they belong. And then in the next slide, 92% of Jewish students believe that they belong. 92 is greater than 85. This is a really tricky thing to unpack, and I'm not trying to suggest that we haven't had a national and international and global thing unfold since October 6th of 2023. I'm not trying to suggest that we don't have a real conversation that can be healthy. I'm just saying that, you know, and the y-axis is skewed because it doesn't go to 0. You know, we don't have p-values. We're not running statistics. And so, like, the fact is that more Jewish students believe they belong here than the overall population by the numbers. And the Muslim students are, substantially similar. So, like, I think there's another way of looking at the raw data and realizing that, I mean, something good is happening here, actually. That Charlottesville remains this, like, special place on earth because, we have other non-public peers who are facing a crisis in their faculty ranks where professors of certain denominations are viewing themselves as needing to extricate themselves from those institutions. And I just don't feel like we have an existential crisis here. And again, I don't want to be a stickler for data, but if you present the data with a y-axis that goes to 0, you run p-values, you realize that 90 students represents 2.8 something percent response, represent 2.8% of the respondents come from that category, 2% or less come from the other category. Type 1 errors in statistics lead you towards small sample sizes, overplaying things. But if we just take a step back, it's like, if you're a Jewish student, you're more likely to feel like you belong than the average student. So maybe there's something great here, as it turns out. I'm not saying that there isn't opportunities for improvement, but this might not necessarily be doom and gloom statistically.
Yeah, just to add to that, I recently met with leadership from the Virginia Interfaith Coalition, which has students from all denominations in leadership, and they were speaking really positively, especially with the recent steps that the administration has taken to improve on issues related to, like, religious accommodations across different religious groups. And so there was an overwhelmingly positive feeling from that meeting, and I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, so is everybody had their say on this? Again, I think the point of this, we made the commitment to bring this data back. Again, this is one data point amongst numbers of both anecdotal and interactions that individuals have had. The commitment, I think, that the administration, Jim and others have made is that we are, there's a commitment, but there's not satisfaction, that the desire to continue to intervene, to improve the environment for all students, regardless of their backgrounds, is there. That's where these investments have been made. And there's a commitment to continue to do that. I think it's what's been communicated. So, again, we'll continue to monitor and provide feedback on these issues. But, Jim, if you have anything you want to add at all?
I thought this was a good discussion, and I think, my view is, you could read the surveys a bunch of different ways, but we also lived through last year. And there were obviously problems that need to be addressed. And I think the efforts are worthwhile. And I think Carlos is right that this is an inexact science trying to increase a sense of belonging. And it's ongoing work. But I think where we see some issues is worth redoubling our efforts to make sure that there are no students, especially no identifiable group of students, who somehow feel like this place doesn't belong to them as much as it does to anybody else.
Yeah, and that's our commitment, so. Again, so thank you for that, Bree, and appreciate your work here, so.
Thank you, Mr.
Provost.
Chair, and thanks, Bree. Our next discussion item is with 4 students who are leaders of the university's Greek councils. And if we can just make room, we've got to get 4 folks up to the table, that'd be great. And students, if you would go ahead and come on up, and I will be introducing you as you come forward. I'll wait for you to sit, and maybe when I call your name, if you would raise your hand. I'm going to thank you again later, but first of all, thank you for coming in. Really, really appreciate your making the time, and I know the board has been looking forward to the opportunity of meeting with you, and we just love hearing from our students, so thank you very much. So representing the Interfraternity Council, Ryan Phelan. Ryan is a third-year student from Atlanta, Georgia, majoring in economics. Representing the Inter-Sorority Council, Meredith Collier is a third-year student from Richmond, pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Youth and Social Innovation in the School of Education and Human Development and a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish. Representing the National Panhellenic Council, Jada Marsh. Jada is a 4th-year student from Atlanta, Georgia. She'll complete a BA in History this semester. And representing the Multicultural Greek Council, Kelly Presley. Hi, Kelly. Kelly's a graduate student from Sallisaw, Oklahoma, who will complete the School of Nursing's Clinical Nurse Leader program this semester. We've asked them just to introduce themselves, just to say a couple words about their organization that they represent, and then have some time for questions following that. And after the students, we'll hear again from Vice President Bonner about some work in student affairs. So we're going to go in the order in which the organizations were founded. So again, thank you. And Ryan, we will start with you.
Sure. Do we have the slides? Perfect. So just some brief information on the Interfraternity Council. At the current state, we have 28 member fraternities. Currently awards $16,000 to $18,000 per year in scholarships. Those mainly go to people who are seeking financial aid and paying fraternity dues. We have a goal of getting to $27,000 yearly by 2030, just to increase the accessibility of Greek life for young men who might not be able to afford it. Some ongoing initiatives that we're currently working on. The Rugby Project. It's a sexual harm prevention project. Students can take a 2-credit course in the spring, and from there give presentations to other fraternities about sexual harm prevention, which we think is important. Student engagement. We've been pushing fraternity men in Greek life to run for positions in student council, the UJC, etc. We actually just got a member of the hall elected to the vice president position of the student council last night, so we're excited about that. Risk management. We've been looking at risk management plans across all chapters, making sure they have the right policies in place to prevent any issues that might arise from the things that fraternities do. And then standards boards. Only 12 of 28 of our fraternities have standards boards that hold members accountable internally within the fraternity. So we've been providing resources to them to establish those within their own chapters and try to keep things as internal as possible when possible. And finally, philanthropy. We're planning to do a big philanthropy event this spring and also one in the fall. We're considering doing a Mad Bull blood drive event, and that's still in the works. But apparently there's an issue giving blood with alcohol in your blood, so we're gonna have to look at that again. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you.
Wahoo wah.
And for that one. All right, we're gonna turn to Meredith.
Does that mean blood is thicker than alcohol?
Just moving on to Meredith.
So hi, my name is Meredith Collier, and I'm the president of the Inter-Sorority Council. So some background about the ISCs. We were established in 1975 after there was an increase of chapters established at the University of Virginia as a result of the university becoming co-educational for undergraduate students in 1970. We are named the Inter-Sorority Council with the goal of emphasizing equality with our peers, the Interfraternity Council. We pride ourselves on academic excellence. Within the fall of 2024, the ISC overall GPA was 3.661 in comparison to the female university GPA of 3.518. In 2005, the Inter-Sorority Council voted to affiliate with the National Panhellenic Conference. The NPC is a governing umbrella organization that is the national umbrella organization for 28 affiliate national chapters. However, a fun fact about the ISC is that UVA is the only college Panhellenic organization that is termed the ISC as a result of our goal to honor our heritage with the pioneering women that established Greek women having a seat at the table in 1975. So we were able to vote to establish our name to remain the Inter-Sorority Council. Some ongoing initiatives that we have currently are Panhellenic Points, which is a reward system that we put in place last semester in our last board in order to strengthen connections and relationships between chapters. This can look like inviting your peer chapter over for brunch at the chapter facility, going to karaoke on Wednesday nights together, having a bouquet making ceremony together, or any sort of social event in order for you to get to know the girls that you're living next to. In addition to that, we have revised our recruitment counselor training for this semester, allowing our recruitment process for recruitment counselors to begin in the spring semester rather than the fall semester. So we can have a comprehensive training module that will take place via Google Classroom in the summer and in the fall. Additionally, our sustainability cabinet has started an initiative called Dress Swap, where this will be a situation that will be rewarded through our Panhellenic Point program. We have many, many events where women are buying dresses for one event and then never wearing it again. So in a way to be more sustainable, as well as allow different women who from different socioeconomic backgrounds to be able to have a new dress for an event, you donate your dress, you receive a point for your chapter that will go towards your tally at the end of the semester. And there will be a boutique that is held by the ISC, no questions asked. You can come in, grab a dress for any event that you have.
Jada.
Hello again. I'm representing the National Panhellenic Council. We were originally established as the Black Fraternal Council in 1991. However, we were reestablished here at the University of Virginia when we became affiliated with the National Panhellenic Council in 2005. All 9 of the Divine 9 organizations have been chartered here on grounds. However, 6 are currently active. We currently have 43 members in total across the council. Our motto is to be a community-conscious, action-oriented organization. One ongoing project that we are currently working on is the PLOTS initiative. PLOTS would be a physical marker of the legacy of Black Greek-letter organizations here on grounds, as well as our contributions nationally. Across the council, we are a very diverse group, all with our own cultures and practices. However, we all are united under the idea of fraternalism as well as service. We are currently working in conjunction with the other councils to put on a Greek Unity Week, which is extremely exciting. We're making a lot of progress on that, hoping to unify all councils under this week and just to represent Greek life to all of UVA.
Jada. And Keely.
Hello everyone, my name is Keely Presley and I am representing the Multicultural Greek Council today. Our council represents more than just a collection of organizations. We're a home and a community for students who don't see themselves reflected in traditional Greek life, and it's important that we have both spaces so that everyone has a place that they feel comfortable. The MGC was founded in 1999 to bring together culturally based Greek organizations at UVA, and today we're home to 11 organizations representing Latina, Asian, multicultural, and LGBTQ plus gender inclusive communities. Our council is focused on creating spaces where members can celebrate their identities, grow as leaders, focus on academic excellence and service, and give back to our community while we're finding a place that feels like home away from home. Many of our organizations are connected to unique governing bodies. For example, some of our Latina-based organizations are part of NALFO, which is the National Association of Latino Fraternal Organizations. Our Asian Pacific and Pacific Islander organizations are affiliated with NAPA, the National APIDA Panhellenic Association, and we do have groups under the National Multicultural Greek Council itself. So these organizations help support us in our cultural identities, and we also wanted to share our mission, which is we promote cultural awareness, leadership, community engagement, and academic excellence while fostering an inclusive and supportive space for all members. And what makes the MGC special is the way that we show up for each other. These are some pictures to show just what the MGC is and some of our unique organizations. We all are very different. That's something that differs a little bit from the other councils, is that there's just so much diversity within this one alone. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, back over to you.
So I just want to jump in and say thank you all for doing this. We've asked you here because fraternity and sorority life is very important to the culture and identity of the University of Virginia. One of the theories around organizational theory is, or the theory around organizations and their success is that you make big places small, right? And people find their people. They find their people. They find people that they share something, whether it be sports, whether it be, for me, with student council, for others, it's their Greek organizations. And that is what they identify, or they use as a proxy for their experience in the institution. And it translates into alumni involvement and engagement. It translates into student activism and engagement. And I think it's probably still true, somebody probably can tell me, is that your students involved in Greek life are probably actually more involved in other activities on grounds as well. So there are a number of board members who were very curious about the health of the Greek system. So because of that, we want them to hear from you directly about that. So thank you for being here. One question would be, what portion of the student body currently is involved in Greek life? What's your perception of that? Do we have stats on that?
It's just under 30%, I believe. Yeah, and I think it's ranged from 33 to 28% historically. So we're within that range.
And what's your assessment of the health of the Greek system generally here at UVA?
Generally, I think it's good. I'll start just from the IFC's perspective. We've seen since COVID, in the post-COVID landscape, we've seen the number of people signing up for Rush decrease, and that was a trend that continued all the way up into this past year. We employed different Rush marketing strategies to get that number back up. So we're not sure if it's kind of a systemic trend or if it's something that we can reverse, but that's a trend we're going to be looking at as we go forward.
And I'll piggyback off of what Ryan said in referring to the Multicultural Greek Council. We also saw similar trends with recruitment after COVID, and that is still kind of trending. So we are really focused on sustainability of our orgs and making sure that they're well supported so that membership can continue.
Carlos, can I follow up on that just to get a little more quantitative? I think we said, Jay, I think you said there was 45 members in the National Panhellenic, but Ryan, do you know how many total guys are in IFC, and Meredith in the sororities, and Kelly, and you have a ballpark?
So I can only speak on behalf of the Inter-Sorority Council, but it historically ranges from about 3,000. If I'm not mistaken, on our org sheet, it's around 2,777 current women that are affiliated with the Inter-Sorority Council. And I can speak on our chapter total, which was set for the spring semester after formal recruitment, which is at a chapter median of 221 members per chapter.
But, 2,700, 2,800 is a good number for you. Ryan, you got a ballpark?
Ballpark, I'd say, is about 1,700. That number diminished a little bit after we lost some fraternities last year, but I think 1,700 would be a good ballpark.
Ellie?
I would say an estimate would be probably around 150 to 200. It does range year to year. We currently have about 7 orgs active now, and that does change semester to semester.
Mr. Chairman, looking at the historical significance of Greek life at the University of Virginia, I'm going to ask Mr. Llewellyn, what percentage of our alumni donors are or were Greek at the University of Virginia?
That's a good question, Dr. Long. I don't know off the top of my head. I can get it for you, but it's pretty significant.
Pretty significant, yeah.
Other questions?
I represent the faculty. I know all of your students. Obviously, you interact with your faculty there. Do your organizations in any way interact with faculty in formal or informal ways?
I will speak on behalf of, I can't speak even on behalf of the whole council, but speaking on behalf of my sorority, Omega Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, we do work directly with faculty. We've worked with Lisa Spidell to host self-defense workshops to educate students on how they can defend themselves if they ever were in an unsafe situation. And we tie that to our philanthropy, which is raising awareness of violence against women.
Speaking on behalf of the NPHC, a lot of us have representation within the faculty, so we make it a goal of ours to interact with them, especially informally, just to build these relationships and bonds. One of the photos on the slide actually was from our student and faculty photo shoot that we do yearly. VP Bonner attended this year, which was really exciting to have him. But we do make it a point to do that in informal spaces, but also formal spaces. For our Founders Day, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the Theta Kappa chapter, did a faculty appreciation where we made goodie bags for the faculty who really made an impact on us, and we passed them out.
Other questions? Well, again, every time I hear it from our students, I'm always impressed. Thank you for your leadership and for your diligence, and we look forward to working with you guys over the next year.
You guys.
We're going to ask Mr. Bonner, our Vice President and Chief Student Affairs Officer, just to give us a brief update. Kenny, just as a reminder, we have another panel to get through afterwards. So just a brief update. I think there were some questions that would be helpful to share about the pace and some of your work. So again, thank you for joining us again a second time today. So.
My pleasure. So I'll try to be brief. I do want to say, first of all, thank you to our students. Fraternity sorority life is a pretty important part of the student experience here. And I think as someone mentioned, that's one of the places where our students find their sense of belonging. And we can talk about that at some other time, but it's great that they were engaged today. In terms of student affairs, we have an Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life, and that office is designed to support those four councils and all of the students that are part of those organizations, and that exists within student affairs. So if there is a singular office here in student affairs that supports and interacts the most with our organizations, fraternities and sororities, it's the Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life, and the students sort of gave you the statistics and the stats about what they do. I was asked to speak specifically about the Policy Accountability and Critical Events Office, which we call PACE. I will say that PACE is not a specific office dedicated to fraternity and sorority life, although it does have engagement with that office depending on the activity that they're looking at. Just to give you a brief overview, PACE stands for Policy Accountability and Critical Events. It's housed within Student Affairs, and it was established in January 2024. And the purpose of that was to support student accountability process, policy compliance, and critical incident event response. You might be asking yourself, why was it established in 2024? We've been here a long time. Well, prior to that, many of the responsibilities in PACE were handled throughout the Division of Student Affairs. And to make a long story short, we saw over time that many of the staff members who were responsible for supporting our students were also responsible for the accountability piece. And that resulted in a lot of conflicts of interest and misunderstandings. And so a decision was made to break that function out so that those offices could support, specifically care for students and support. And then we had a separate group of people who were managing the accountability. As the name suggests, there are really three functions to PACE, and I'll talk about each of them. The accountability is where PACE facilitates student accountability practices that are fair, transparent, and educational. And a big part of that is supporting our student self-governance structures, the University Judiciary Committee, and the Honor Committee. And so that's the accountability piece. With respect to policy, PACE regularly reviews university and student affairs policy, and we also look at government legislation to ensure that we're in compliance with any laws that are passed federally or by the state. With respect to critical incidents and events, PACE oversees emergency response plans. And one example of that, last week, PACE was heavily involved in helping to coordinate our response in student affairs to make sure that we had continuity of services, information was flowing, and we were coordinating with the rest of the response at the university. In February, when we had inclement weather situations, PACE was instrumental in working with student affairs staff to make sure our facilities were operational. So they have a number of functions, and one of them is adjudication. So I'll talk a little bit about adjudication because that's where it may come into play for fraternity and sororities and other student organizations. First, I want to be clear that PACE does not adjudicate cases or issue sanctions. This is the role of the University Judiciary Committee, UJC, and PACE has no authority or control over the UJC. The separation of roles and authority between the administration and UJC, I think, was confirmed by Harper Jones, the chair of the UJC, at a previous board meeting. But what PACE does is determine if student conduct can be addressed informally or should be referred to the UJC for formal adjudication. Most incidents that PACE manages are informally managed through an educational approach. As it relates to many of our student organizations, if they find themselves talking to PACE, it's in accordance with our responsibility to enforce the Virginia law, to investigate reports of hazing. It's also a federal requirement that we do that. So PACE investigates hazing allegations using internal and external investigators. And if PACE determines that hazing may have occurred, they'll refer that matter to the UJC for adjudication in some cases. In most severe cases, we have the ability to terminate a fraternity or sorority's fraternal order agreement, which is an agreement between the individual chapters and the university. In those cases, students always have the right to appeal, and those appeals are handled by the Judicial Review Board, which is separate from Student Affairs, and none of the members of PACE are participating in that review board. One of the things I'll say is that if at any point this committee wants me to come back and do a deep dive into PACE and the relationship with fraternity and sorority life, or any other aspect of student affairs, I'm happy to do that. But that office has a responsibility for 3 different things at the university, and the accountability piece often comes into engagement with our fraternities and sororities.
Great. Thank you, Kenan. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I would like that deep dive on PACE. I'm very unhappy with the way the PACE personnel handle a number of things, so I would like to hear that deep dive.
Happy to return.
We'll put that on the agenda. Other questions?
In a university that's so deeply rooted in student self-governance, what aspects of PACE are duplicative?
None.
And when is a student subject to double jeopardy?
Well, there would be no double. PACE does not have any sanctioning power in terms of individual students. Those are all referred to the UJC.
But if the system of student self-governance is that a student with a concern can raise a concern to the UJC and trigger an investigation.
Mhm.
So why do we need a separate entity to do what the students have done for themselves for 199 years?
What PACE usually does when I say informal, I'll give you an example of how PACE works with informal. There are times when anytime we are aware of like a demonstration or expressive activity on grounds, PACE will reach out to our student organizations and remind them of the policies and procedures that we have at the university, and offer to be a resource to them if they have questions about how to comply with those policies and procedures. Oftentimes, those are informal conversations and discussions, and students take us up on that. Some don't, but it's an opportunity for PACE to engage with them and provide them resources. In some cases where a student's behavior does not rise to the level of a standard of conduct violation, PACE will meet with that student and have a discussion. There is no formal sanction involved. It's a mediation discussion. The student sort of understands what the policy is, and they move away from that. We look at serious cases where we believe a student has violated our standards of conduct, and those are referred to UJC for formal adjudication.
So I'm mindful of time because we do have another panel, but are there a couple of the quick questions, and we will definitely have Kenan come back.
Well, just a clarifying question. My understanding is that this work has been going on in student affairs for quite some time. This wasn't invented with PACE. So it's not the case that it's only been 1 year that student affairs has been doing this. It's a dedicated group within student affairs.
Absolutely, yes. We were doing this in student affairs, but it was mixed within other people's roles. So you might one day be working with a student, supporting them, which is what our CAS office does. A student might be in distress, they might need help and resources, and then the next day you might be the person talking to them about some disciplinary issue and responsible for referring them to the UJC. And so the decision was made to separate those roles and responsibilities to eliminate that conflict of interest.
And can I just add, that actually was a recommendation that came out of the work from the 11/13 incident. So there was concern that we had individuals sort of sitting on both sides, care and concern, but also sort of you're running into disciplinary issues. So that it came out of the recommendations of the 11/13 lessons learned.
Hey, David, last question.
Yeah, so I did, I read the hazing guidelines, and I was like, wow, these are really strict. I mean, almost anything's hazing. So then I looked at the law, and it's very different, right? The state law is actually has to be harm done, physical harm. And then I read the small print on our guidelines, and these go by the Chev model policy. So you go to the Chev model policy, and it's exactly the same as our hazing policy. So I did ask Chev and Secretary Gadara, like, does our policy have to follow the model policy, or can you depart as long as you're legal? And haven't heard back yet because they're moving at their pace. No pun intended. But it is a good question because until I hear otherwise, I'm not going to complain about your guidelines if that's what Chev said they have to be. Right? It's a good question.
Yeah, we feel it's important to comply.
You guys are going to go into extra innings, but go ahead.
Really quickly, just so I understand, so when Pi Kappa Alpha got kicked off the campus grounds, who made that decision? How did that happen?
So so if it involves a organization, every fraternity and sorority, generally speaking, fraternity and sorority agrees to a partnership with the university through an agreement called a fraternal order agreement. And within that agreement, they agree to certain things. And if they violate that, and we believe it's severe or pervasive in the sense of harm to the community, we have the ability as the university to terminate that agreement. So does an organization. So all of the organizations, the individual chapters who are part of those Greek councils also have that option. They at any point can say, we don't want to be a part of this fraternal order agreement. The reason that the fraternal order agreement organization agreement is important is it provides those opportunities for those groups to access resources, space, advising, reports that we provide to those organizations and supporting their recruitment processes. But in cases where you hear about a fraternity being suspended, or their fraternal order agreement that's a PACE decision because it's an actual agreement. If it's individual students or organizations, that would be referred to UJC. And Lisa has way more experience with that portion of it. But if individual students are alleged to have violated our hazing policy, we would refer all of those students to UJC for adjudication.
Yeah, the Judiciary Committee has the authority to suspend or terminate organizations, including fraternal organization agreements, but all fraternities that have been terminated in the first stage before they've gone to the Judiciary Committee. And so far, the Judiciary Committee has only issued suspensions of fraternities, whereas the fraternities that have been terminated post the investigation that's been conducted by the PACE hazing panel.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move on. Again, you asked for it, so we delivered it. We'll come back next time with more time if you want to continue to have this engagement. Mr. Provost.
All right, thank you. All right, so thank you, Mr. Bonner. All right, our final presentation today is from three of our highly distinguished faculty members, and as they're coming in, I'll go ahead and introduce them just so we can get right to it. And what we wanted to do is, having had the opportunity to hear from some students, to invite some faculty members to talk about their experience at the university. And so three of our very distinguished faculty members are joining us. And I'll just go through this really quickly. Professor Ken Elzinga, who has taught at the university for over 50 years and is a true UVA legend. Among his many other honors, Professor Elzinga was the first recipient of the Cavaliers Distinguished Teaching Professorship at the university. He's received the Alumni Association's Distinguished Professor Award, the Commonwealth of Virginia's Outstanding Faculty Award, awards in education from the Keenan and Templeton Foundations, and is the recipient of the Thomas Jefferson Award, the highest honor given at the university. And many of us had the pleasure of seeing a portrait of Dr. Elzinga at the library about 2 weeks ago. Professor Scott Barker from the School of Engineering. Professor Elzinga has been here for 50 years or more. Professor Scott Barker has been at the university for 25 years, so 50, 25, 5 is the way we thought about this. Professor Barker in engineering received the 2016 Edlick Henderson Innovator of the Year Award, the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers Outstanding Young Engineer Award, a National Science Foundation Career Award, and many others. I'm just going to move on so you've got more time to talk. Professor Danielle Citron at the School of Law was named one of the top 50 world thinkers by UK's Prospect magazine in 2015. Among her many honors, she is a MacArthur Fellow, the Genius Awards, as they are commonly referred to. Professor Citron has been here for 5 years. So I'm just going to do it in that order and jump right to you, Professor Elzinga. We will give you the honor, and thank you for joining us. Just to begin with any comments you want to share, and then a chance for discussion with the board.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. This is a curious experience for me because for some of you, there's been a vertical relationship where I've been on top as the professor and the student. And that's sort of flipped today, where you're up here as the Board of Visitors, and I'm down here, a guy who works in the trenches as a professor. But frankly, I don't really think of you as my boss, the board members. I think of my boss as the dean of the college. And I see John now here. Thank you, John, for something you wrote the other day when you said, the heart of the university is the college. I couldn't agree more. And I want to talk to you a little bit about my experiences as a professor. And I'll just start by telling you about my day today. It's a non-random sample,
But it started out with my working on an endowed lecture that I'm giving next month at another university, so it's time to wrap that up. Then I got galley proofs for an article I have coming out that was part of the Karsh Democracy Initiative. A student stopped by to say goodbye before leaving for spring break. Then I had a meeting about whether I would go up to New York to raise money for the Economic Career Office, which is a really important organization to me within the econ department. So we talked about that. Then over my digital transom came this article from the New Yorker, Will Harvard Bend or Break? And I took a break to read this article. The New Yorker usually tilts left, and I usually tilt right, but the New Yorker stuff is usually worth reading. And this is, I think, worth reading for board members. A very interesting article by Nathan Heller. I don't agree with all of it, but it's good for me to read stuff with which I don't always agree. Then the funniest thing that happened today was I got a phone call from a mother of a former student of mine who was in Econ 201 last fall. And this student had failed my class. I have a practice of writing a personal letter to every student who fails my class. And you may think, well, that's just 2 or 3 letters maybe, but when you have 1,000 students, there's a lot of letters. And this mom, the student goes to the letter goes to the student. The student had shared the letter with her mom, and the mom called me to thank me for writing this letter, and it led to a dialogue with her daughter about her daughter's academic performance at UVA, which was not certainly stellar in my class and not consistent with her high school record. As a professor, I don't get a chance to talk to the parents of my students very often, but this was really a delightful experience about sharing with a mom about her concern about her daughter's academic progress here. And I was grateful that she was grateful that I wrote her daughter. So that's kind of a day, and probably like most professors, it's busy. I work long hours. I've been blessed with a lot of energy, and I'm really grateful that my work as a professor has so many different things: writing, teaching, talking to students. What happens to a lot of professors when they get older is they seem to not like young people as much anymore, but still like young people. I just really consider it a treat to work with young people. I've served on a number of boards, including 8 years on the Board of Trustees of another college in Michigan. So I know something about what you guys do on the BOV. And one thing I know is it's a thankless task. So I will change that and say thank you for serving on the board. I am tremendously blessed to be a professor here. And I use that word blessed in a theological sense, because I get a chance to work with young people, to do research, to go off and write mysteries on the side. It's just hard to imagine a better job to have. Is everything right? No, and I'm going to mention 2 areas of concern of mine. One is DEI. Went around when I joined the faculty, and I thought a lot about it. I tend to think that DEI, the way it's generally implemented, as I understand it, is immoral. I'll just put that on the table. Now, I'm prepared to be talked out of that, like I hold any view that I could be, hey, Ken, you're just wrong about that. I would feel better about DEI if the people who generally implement it were conversant with the works of African American scholars that impress me, like Thomas Sowell, Jason Riley, Roland Fryer, Glenn Lowry. These are people who have shaped my views about DEI, but also experiences. And I'll just tell you 2 quick stories involving the English department. When I came here at UVA, the English department was the crown jewel of the College of Arts and Sciences, and there may be some people at this table who think that's still the case. It is a great department. One of my friends in the English department, who since passed away, had the view that he had to keep quiet about his political views and his economic views, because he thought if the department knew about this, he would never get promoted. So he was totally silent about that until he got tenure. I found that really sad. Now, maybe he was mistaken, but that just shouldn't be. Now, fast forward, another professor in the English department that I admire, I've read one of his books, said not too long ago, DEI, that's how we keep the Republicans out. Now, what do you make of that? Is that a joke, a quip? Is there some substance behind it?
whatever it is, I just think about what does that mean for young faculty who hear that? What does it mean for faculty who are not in the progressive mainstream to hear stories like that? But those are stories, and stories are not data, as you indicated. And I'm certainly living proof of the fact that I feel academic freedom here. I can come here and say what I just said to you people, and I don't fear that I'm gonna lose my job tomorrow morning. So it's a complicated area to get a handle on empirically, really difficult. There are things you can get a handle on empirically, and one of them I did. And I have been concerned about an aspect of the undergraduate curriculum in the college. Now, let me just say something about myself that I didn't know when I came here. I get such a kick out of teaching the students, the children of my former students. When kids come up to me and say, my mom had you, my dad had you, I just think that is so great, that is so cool. They usually have a big smile on their face. The only problem that's happened recently is I've had 2 kids come up to me and tell me that I taught their grandfather. Just led me to go back to my office and have a good cry. But the parents, I really like teaching that. But my heart is really with first gen students. That's who I care about. I'm first gen, and I love to try and help first gen students as much as I value the legacy kids that I teach. And something's happening with the undergraduate curriculum through something called the engagement curriculum. And I asked a student of mine, really super student in Econ 201, an A+ student, I said, could you gather some data on engagement curriculum? And he came up, like a lot of numbers guys like me, I'm a numbers guy too, with about 5 pages of data. I just want to share 2 data points. It's 836 courses in the engagement curriculum. The average GPA across all 836, this is not survey data, these are real numbers, is 3.86. Rounded off, it's 3.9. Rounded off, it's 4.0. In other words, students taking the engagement curriculum, almost everybody gets an A or an A-. Now, is that a problem? Well, I'm an economist. I think about inflation. That's grade inflation. To me, this is so absurd, so much of a participation trophy that really not really is troubled by it. It sounds like something for a Saturday Night Live parody, that you have this curriculum and everybody gets an A. What concerns me is, remember I'm an economist, is I think a lot about alternative opportunities foregone. So what I think about here is, what is the alternative opportunity foregone for a first gen kid who's taking these classes that are largely just participatory and for whom he or she thinks, oh, you just get an A for showing up essentially. If that's the case, the data suggests that something is wrong here. And I worry about the first gen kid who doesn't take Calc 2, who doesn't take a biology course, who doesn't take an art history course, because they are, to use another econ term, crowded out. That the alternative opportunity foregone is something that, whether this is a board matter or an administration matter, I don't know. But as an economist, I worry about the alternative opportunities foregone of the engagement curriculum. There's something strange about 836 courses generating an average GPA of 3.9. Okay, I'll stop. You guys are up.
All right, well, thank you very much. My name is Scott Barker, a faculty member in electrical and computer engineering. Just want to thank you for this opportunity to share with you a little bit about my experience as a faculty member here for about 25 years, not quite as long as Ken, but maybe one day. As a Virginia alum, I took my degree from the university. It certainly had a large part in my desire to be a faculty member here. And as a professor, I have definitely cherished the opportunity that I've had to impact UVA students in a variety of ways. Not only through my teaching, that's an important aspect of it, but I think also through my support of various student clubs. I've been the faculty advisor for the Virginia Glee Club, just started up as the faculty advisor for an amateur radio club, and so in a number of different ways. It's really been a fantastic opportunity. Today, I'd like to share with you a little bit about the impact that I've had through my research and working directly with students at UVA. As a professor in a STEM field, I spend a lot of time working on externally funded research through close mentorship of a group of graduate and undergraduate students. The inclusion of undergraduate students in our research is really valuable for them. It really helps bring alive all that they're seeing and learning in the classroom. And the graduate students are really the backbone of the research that we do. They spend countless hours learning and applying the knowledge and to seek new ideas and innovations. The relationships that I develop with these students are often very tight. And many times after they have spent years of intense work to reach the point of earning a PhD, they're almost like family to me. The work that we are funded to do in STEM generally always involves searching for new ideas and innovations, resulting in the creation of intellectual property. We publish about this, and oftentimes UVA files for patent protection. At times, our innovations have significant impacts on our fields, resulting in IP being licensed and potentially commercialized. Occasionally, we find ourselves in a position where our innovation has great potential, but the industry, for whatever reason, is either unwilling or unable to invest. And once in a while, in those occasions, we take a plunge. As faculty, we are able to, I think it was the Bayh-Dole Act, that allows us to have a managed conflict of interest. Through that, we are able to found our own companies. And I have had the fortune of being in that position with a couple of my colleagues, Professors Weichel and Lichtenberger. And in 2011, we founded Dominion Microprobes. And we were able to commercialize one of these innovations, and it is now sold around the world. So that is a really exciting opportunity, not only for us as faculty to see something that we have worked on and devoted years to developing, to getting out and having that impact, but those companies often end up employing the students from UVA. They end up generating jobs in the community. So it really has a much larger impact than just teaching our classes. Many of my colleagues in sciences and engineering have also founded startups over the years. Oftentimes, these companies are indeed based right here in Charlottesville, with the resulting increase in economic activity and in the surrounding communities. So over these past 25 years, I've seen UVA support and invest in the infrastructure that is required for us to stay at the forefront of discovery and innovation. In my own area, the use by UVA of the Strategic Investment Fund enabled crucial renovations and updating of equipment to the IFAB, what is known as the Innovation Fabrication Facility. And it's really our ability to do this research, to publish, to spin out these companies when the timing's right, that attracts the best students and the best faculty to UVA. I'm happy to say that my experience as a member of the faculty at UVA has been extraordinary. I really could not have been more blessed, as Ken said, and I use it in the same sense that he did. Recent events notwithstanding, I am excited about UVA's future and the direction in which we're headed. Thank you again for your time and the opportunity to share my experiences with you. And with that, I'll turn it over to...
It's so fun being the punk in the group, I have to say. Right, the youngest of all, but though not in years. But what's really fun and delightful, Ken, is that my beloved colleague, Payvon Adut, says you are her favorite professor. So at the law school, there's so much love for you. It's a delight to be here with all of you. I'm a privacy scholar and an advocate and advisor. And what is so gratifying is that privacy is a shared value. We all want, expect, and deserve what I call intimate privacy. So that's information about and access to our bodies, our innermost thoughts, which of course we share all day long with our devices as we like, click, and share, and browse, and read, and search, and our close relationships. And what certainly has been gratifying in the last couple of days even is to see that some of the work that we've been doing over the last decade has, I think, gotten some important attention, and I'm always the most depressing person in the room, which is the work, though, is that I'm going to talk to you a bit about, is about the non-consensual sharing and distribution of real and then synthetic or fake intimate images, so often referred to as deep fakes. And because of how democratized and easy to access these tools are, what we've seen, and I think what has brought so many people together, of course, are our children, youth. And what we've seen across the country, whether it's Texas, California, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, is unfortunately for middle school and high school students, is the sharing and posting of young people, often mostly young girls, photos of them, their faces morphed into porn. And for young people, and this is true of adults, but especially for young people, it's devastating, right? We've seen young people as young as like 13 and 14 try to commit suicide, fall into deep depression, feel like going to school. It feels like there are a million eyes on their bodies, even though, intellectually they know it's not their bodies. And it's really hard to square coming to school. What I've been doing for the last decade is, and I'm gonna explain why law really matters. Law makes a huge difference, both in how victims see themselves and the kinds of messages that we send. Law is our teacher. And over when I first started doing this work, as both an academic and as an advocate on behalf of the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, there were 2 states that had criminal and civil penalties for the non-consensual disclosure of intimate images or intimate privacy violations. And now, as we work with lawmaker for lawmaker and state for state, there are now 49 states, DC, Guam, and Puerto Rico. And as we've worked with lawmakers at the state level, there are now 18 states that have criminal and civil penalties for what we can describe as digital forgeries or digital impersonations involving, intimate images. And now, we've been working with Congress for the last 10 years, and it's kind of exciting to see interest in working on federal solutions. But one thing I think, and we are seeing is sort of this shared purpose, is around the role that content platforms play. They're in the best position, I feel like our least cost avoider can, right, to minimize the harm. And they're right now immune from responsibility. And so something that I've been working on with lawmakers across the aisle is Section 230 reform. With the amazing help with some of my colleagues, including Ken Abraham at the law school and others who have been so gratifying in some of that work, I wrote a piece called How to Reform Section 230. And there's sort of nothing better when a congressperson gets on the phone and the principal calls you and said, help me write that law. So on behalf of a representative from Iowa and a representative from Massachusetts, we have a law that I think would modestly but importantly help amend that law. And what's also really fun, so one of the many wonderful things about being at UVA is I'm a Jefferson Scholars Foundation Distinguished Professor. And that's meant, with my close relationship with Jimmy Wright, is getting to know these amazing young student leaders. And I had a JSF scholar as my research assistant on that paper. So it has been, I've loved coming here, and I get to be walking with a path with these two, nothing better. And I get to do the work that I love and with colleagues and students I so adore. So I just want to say I have incredible gratitude for all of you and for welcoming me to Charlottesville. So thank you so much.
Right, well,
Sure, yeah.
questions?
Can I say something? I know we're over time.
Sure, yeah.
And I'll be, I just can't resist the opportunity to state publicly that I think Ken Elsing is one of the greatest assets that the University of Virginia has ever had. I was here for 7 years. He was my favorite professor by far. He taught my son Patrick, who was the class of 2019, so I'm one of those people he was talking about. And I know countless people feel the same way. So it's a special privilege and honor to have him here as a member of the Board of Visitors, addressing me and the other board members. I took my first class from him when I was 17 years old, and I'm pretty old now, so I know he's been here a while. But just
Don't say that to him.
I just couldn't resist making that short speech.
And it's here at your request.
And giving Ken my thanks and the thanks of generations and generations of UVA students and alumni. So thank you, Ken.
And I'm mad that he stole the mic before I could say that. So thank you for me too. 50 years ago, I was in his class.
Did either one of them get A pluses? They both got it. Well, Bert got it.
a privacy rules?
I took his antitrust case.
Other questions? Wow, speechless. All right, going once, going twice. On behalf of the board, I want to say thank you. Again, we know that you guys are you're at midterms and spring break is starting, and I'm sure it was a sacrifice for you all to be here, and of course, saving the best for last. But thank you for your commitment to the institution, for your engagement with our students, and we really appreciate you.
I have Professor Elsing, I do have a question. Do you still do the Dutch knockout?
I do the Dutch knockout, and I don't understand why more professors don't do that. It's a tremendous strategy for students who, so a lot of the students I teach in Econ 201 now, they're first year students. When Bert and Doug were here, it was primarily second year. Somehow that's tilted, I don't know why. So I have a lot of first year students who really struggle with their first college level academic endeavor, and they do very poorly on the first test. For many of them, the second test is an improvement, and then somewhere around November, some light goes on in terms of understanding econ. They end up doing really well on the final. The Dutch knockout, if you haven't heard the term, says, okay, I will ignore the first two tests if you really do well. That is, at the end of the semester on a comprehensive exam that takes 3 hours, you can do A work, then you get an A for the course. And so lots and lots of students have told me over the years, oh, the Dutch knockout saved me. In fact, the mother I spoke with today wanted to have the Dutch knockout explained to her.
Thank you.
All right.
That's fun. That's a great.
I think we exhausted the agenda.
Thank you. Great, thank you all. We'll be back here at 6 o'clock for a reception in the upper west room. Yes.
No. Let's save it for tomorrow.
We're save it for tomorrow.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, tomorrow.
You almost.
Thank you, sir.
Where you said that.
All right.